There are many lakes in the state of Maine, hundreds of them actually. Since it is the most lake-rich state in the US, most of these lakes are beautiful and peaceful places to go swimming or fishing or just relaxing in a rowboat. But one lake in particular has become the center of a dark local legend that has allegedly claimed the lives of over 24 tourists. This is the story of the lake and the terrifying choir that haunts it. It all begins with a tourist attraction located about an hour's drive north of the city of Bangor. To get there, you'll want to visit the town of Orrington and then follow signs to the beautiful 374-acre Pushaw Lake. The lake itself used to be known as the Brownville Reservoir, but locals still refer to it by its original name. And with good reason too, because this place is anything but brown. It is an emerald green jewel nestled between hills and dotted with small islands. And even though it's man-made, it looks so natural that you'd never guess that it was formed in the 1940s when the nearby village of Brownville was completely flooded. Like any decent-sized body of water, Pasqua Lake is surrounded by some pretty cool hiking trails, perfect for those looking to stretch their legs after a long drive or to take in the sights of the gorgeous Maine wilderness. There are also plenty of little beaches around the lake where visitors can take a dip or cast a line into the water. And that's what makes the story of the so-called choir under the lake all the more disturbing. According to local legend, every summer there are strange drownings at Pasqua Lake, ones that seem almost supernatural in nature. In fact, there have been at least 26 unexplained drownings at Pasqua Lake since the early 1980s. Now I know exactly what you're thinking. Drowning is one of the leading causes of death worldwide. Even in Maine alone, dozens of people drown every year. And how many times have you heard stories like this? A bunch of stupid kids ignore warning signs, venture out into the middle of the lake at night, fall off their inflatable raft and then panic and drown. Well, that may well be what happened to some of the victims at Pushaw Lake. But that isn't what the locals believe. If you ask anyone from the area, they'll tell you that there's something evil lurking beneath the waters of Pushaw Lake. It all starts when the sun goes down and the fog rolls in. According to reports, if you were standing on the shores of the lake or in one of the boats, bobbing gently on the surface, and the mist rolls in, you may hear the sound of voices that seem to come from underwater. At first, it's nothing more than a low hum, like the steady drone of cicadas on a hot summer evening. Then slowly, the voices begin to rise above the water, taking shape and clarity, until suddenly you rehearing an entire choir seemingly singing from within the depths of the lake itself. And that's when the real danger begins, because according to local lore, those who hear the singing aren't granted much time to escape their watery fate. No, the only thing that awaits them is a swift and terrible drowning. That's right, anyone who hears the choir singing from below is doomed to be taken by the lake and become another unsolved drowning mystery. Now, I should point out that there is no actual evidence to support this claim. Sure, there have been dozens of drownings at the lake, but most of those cases are either alcohol or drug-related, with many of the other victims simply having ignored warnings about the lake's strong undertow. However, there is one case in particular that appears to have kicked off the whole choir legend. Back in 1980, two men were boating on the lake. When they hit a sandbar and capsized, one of the men managed to flip the boat and get himself upright again, but his friend wasn't so lucky. He struggled in the water for a while, but eventually disappeared beneath the surface and didn't resurface. The man who had managed to save himself made his way back to shore, flagged down some emergency services and told them about his missing friend. After a lengthy search, the man's body was finally recovered, but not before the townspeople began to whisper about the mysterious drownings at Pushaw Lake. Was it the work of some malevolent entity or just a freak accident? Well, nobody could say for sure, but the whispers continued. In the years following that incident, several similar incidents occurred. People would go missing on the lake, their empty boats drifting ashore with no sign of the crew. Some bodies were recovered, others weren't, and each time, the same questions were asked, and the same answers were given. Was it the work of foul play, bad weather, or something more sinister? Again, nobody really knows. But all of this pales in comparison to the case of Joseph Lord. On August 2, 1981, 61-year-old Joseph Lord was out sailing on the lake when he noticed that his boat was being pulled dangerously close to a sandbar. In a panic, he dropped anchor in an attempt to keep his boat from running aground, but it was too late. His boat hit the sandbar and he was thrown into the water. Now, to be fair, this was probably Joe's own fault. He was an experienced sailor, but in a moment of panic, he forgot to untie the anchor before going about his business, and that mistake would cost him his life. Joe tried to make his way back to his anchored vessel, but the current was strong, and he was quickly being swept further away from his boat. As he struggled in the water, he saw a rowboat approaching and began waving his arms frantically. The people in the boat saw him and were making their way toward him, when suddenly something bizarre happened. The people in the boat stopped their efforts to save Joseph and instead climbed into the water themselves. They began pulling Joseph back toward his anchored sailboat, but not to help him. Instead, they were dragging him down to the bottom of the lake. To make matters worse, this was no hallucination. Dozens of witnesses lined the shore, watching in horror. as the people in the boat dragged Joseph's lifeless body down into the murky depths of Pasqua Lake. Now, before we move on, I should clarify something. This part of the story comes directly from eyewitness accounts and was not included in the official police report. According to the police, Joseph's body was found floating in the lake a few hours later and was recovered without incident. So what exactly happened here? Did Joseph see a band of malevolent lake spirits dragging him down to his watery grave? Or did he panic and somehow find himself tangled in his anchor chain? Who knows? But this story only adds to the legend of the lake and has ensured that the name of the choir under the lake continues to strike fear into the hearts of anyone planning on taking a trip to Pasqua Lake at night. Because if you ask any local, they'll tell you that there's a good reason no one dares set foot on the lake once the sun goes down. See, it isn't just those who hear the singing that are doomed. Anyone who ventures onto the lake after dark risks becoming a victim of the choir. Yes, according to local lore, the choir sings louder every year, and their music is said to lure unsuspecting sailors and swimmers right into the water where they drown and become another unsolved mystery of Pasqua Lake. Of course, not everyone believes in this story. The so-called choir under the lake is nothing more than a local legend, and the drownings can be explained by a number of factors. That being said, there are those who swear they've seen strange things on the lake, like the phantom boat filled with ghostly sailors, some who are said to be the very people who drowned on the lake all those years ago. And let's be honest, even if this is all just made up, wouldn't you rather be safe than sorry? Just last year, a local man named Roger Post decided to test his luck. Roger had heard the local legends, of course, but figured it was all just a bunch of superstitious nonsense. And so, one foggy evening, he and his wife decided to take a nighttime swim in the lake. Unfortunately, the couple soon found themselves in trouble. Strong currents and Roger's intoxicated state meant that before long, he had no choice but to call for help. Thankfully, he and his wife were rescued, but not without suffering hypothermia. In the end, Roger survived, but his wife was forced to stay in the hospital for several days. Now, perhaps he was just lucky. Maybe the choir under the lake decided to pass on him, or maybe he learned his lesson and has stayed out of the lake ever since. Whatever the case, he's still alive to tell the tale. Unlike many others who have dared to enter the lake, they heard the choir, and the lake claimed them as its own. And while there's no actual evidence to prove that such a choir exists, there are those who swear they've seen strange lights and heard music coming from the lake. If you've ever been there, I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments. But whatever you do, don't go there after dark. If you want to see what lies beneath the surface, there's always Google Maps.